Hello students. In the previous videos in this series, we've basically talked about what it means to solve an equation, looked at some of the overall techniques for doing so, and introduced some terminology such as equivalent equations. So what we're going to do now is actually start to solve some equations. So we'll start with these two-step equations. Now I like to think of an equation as a balance. What I have on the left-hand side, which is 6 times some unknown number plus 5, is the same as 23. So you think of that as that side balances that side. Now if I do any operation to the left-hand side of this equation, to keep the balance, I have to do exactly the same step to the right-hand side. And to decide what step to do, use AMIB, which is the order of operations in reverse. So to start with this equation here, n is multiplied by 6 and 5 is added. In order to solve the equation, the first thing we have to do is undo any adding and subtracting. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to subtract 5. To keep the balance, I subtract 5 from the other side, and that leaves me with just 6n plus 5 minus 5 disappears, equals 18. Now I have a one-step equation, and the opposite of multiplying by 6 is dividing by 6. So I can cross those out or divide them out. That just gives me 1, and 1 times n is n. And looks like the answer is n equals 3. Quick check. 6 times 3 is 18. 18 plus 5 is 23. So that does give us the correct answer. Similarly, over here, the first step I have to do is the opposite of subtract 3, which is add 3. And I do that again to both sides to keep the balance. Minus 3 plus 3, so the 3 disappears. That just goes to 0. And I get 4y equals negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4. And to undo multiply by 4, I divide by 4. And negative 4 divide 4 is negative 1. Okay, why don't you stop the video and do the bottom two questions in your MathsPad. Okay, welcome back students. Well, to start this one, we add 4 to both sides. Minus 4 plus 4, that disappears, leaving just the 3m equals 12. And divide both sides by 3. And m equals 4. And the last one, which involves some negatives, the opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3. So I do that operation to both sides to keep the balance. That leaves me with just 9g on the left. Negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5. Divide both sides by 9, like so. And that means g is equal to negative 5/9. And there's nothing wrong, of course, with your answer being a fraction. That's a perfectly legitimate solution to an equation. Okay, so that's an example of some two-step equations. Let's move on and have a look at a different type of two-step equation. And the only real difference here is we've got decimals and even fractions. But the techniques we've learned for whole numbers work just as well for decimals and fractions. So start off by, again, AMIBs. First thing we do is undo adding and subtracting. So I subtract 1.3 from both sides. That leaves me with just 0.5f. Now this one I can do in my head or on paper, so therefore I don't need a calculator. 9 take 3 is 6. 3 take 1 is 2. And to finish this off, we divide by 0.5. Well, I can do that one in my head as well. let's just do it on the calculator just for practice. So we need to go 2.6 divide 5, 2.6 over 5, and I know the answer is going to be 5.2. Oh, I made a mistake. Okay, let's go back and divide by 0.5. That might help. And the answer will be 5.2. Now with questions like this, it gets a little bit hard to sort of check your answers mentally. So you have two options. One is to just double check all your steps to make sure you've done them correctly and in the correct order. Or the alternative is to use your calculator to check. So you could go 0.5 multiplied by 5.2, because that's what I think the value of f is, and then plus 1.3. And that gives me 3.9, so that one checks. Okay, let's try this one just here. So the first step I'm going to do is the opposite of subtracting 3.8 is adding 3.8. And minus 3.8 plus 3.8 disappears. They subtract out, you might say. I can add these in my head. 8 plus 6 is 14, carry the 1. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6. Divide by 0.2. And once again, we can use a calculator to help us with that. So drag it off to the side and clear it, and we have 6.4 divide 0.2. Okay, didn't use the fraction bar, but that's okay. The divide's fine, and A is 32. Okay, in the interest of time, I won't actually check this one, but once again, you could go ahead and substitute 32 back in for A and see if you get the correct answer. Okay, why don't you have a go, please, at these two equations. Okay, let's see how you went. So I've got a negative coefficient on the z, but that's not going to cause me any problems, especially with a calculator. So the first thing I have to do is plus 2.6 minus 2.6. That disappears. That leaves just the negative 1.3z on the left. And we'll use our calculator to assist us on the right. So that's going to be negative 6.5 subtract 2.6. And we get negative 9.1. And to solve the equation, or finish solving the equation, we divide by negative 1.3. So don't forget the negative sign. And negative 9.1 divide negative 1.3. Negative 9.1 divide negative 1.3. And I get 7. And again, I won't check it in this video in the interest of saving time, but what you should do is replace the z with a 7 and check that the expression does evaluate to be negative 6.5. Okay, to finish off, here we have an equation that involves fractions. Well, fractions, because we have a calculator to assist us, fractions are really no more difficult than whole numbers or decimals, just a bit more typing into the calculator. So the opposite of adding 1/3 is subtracting 1/3. So they disappear, leaving just 3h. And now I have to do 7/8 take 1/3. So let's get the calculator out. We use the fraction button in this case. So I've got 7 over 8 subtract fraction 1 over 3. And I end up with 13 on 24. Okay, and to finish off, I have to divide both sides by 3. So I could write it as a fraction over 3, but that's a little bit messy. So in this case, I might just write it as divide rather than using the fraction bar. So divide both sides by 3 times 3, divide 3, cancels out, leaving just the h. And on the right-hand side, I need 13 on 24, which I have. Divide 3, and my final answer, 13 on 72. And once again, to check your answer, you either carefully work through the steps to make sure you've done them correctly, or you go 3 times that plus 1/3 and see if you get 7/8 using your calculator. Okay, so there's a couple of different techniques for solving two-step linear equations.